Welcome, Lama Tsultrim. It's good to see you. You're joining us from Costa Rica.
That's right. Nosara area. I'm looking out at the ocean.
And who's behind you? There's a big deity right behind you.
Tara.
Tara. Yes.
She's the female Buddha of compassion. And right below me, where I'm looking, is a beach where the turtles come to lay their eggs and have done so for millions of years. So I love that about this house, that it's in that place that the turtles are magnetized to come. And this house is called Casa Tara, and sort of fell into my hands during COVID in quite an amazing way. And it's a wonderful refuge.
Well, you fell into my hands during COVID in an amazing way. I was coming down to Costa Rica for retreat, and I sat at a table with you. I didn't know who you were. I just sat down, and Michael, your partner, said to me, "Do you know who this is?" And I was like, "No." He said, have you heard of the book Feeding Your Demons?" And I said, "I just finished a book where I cited you in it." And he said, "Yes, this is Lama Tsultrim. She wrote that book." And it was this shocking moment of, wow, I'm sitting at the table with Lama Tsultrim, who has your book had a personal impact on me, so much so that I was able to squeeze it into the psychology book that I think may have been a little bit on the edges of what could fit in the realm of psychology, although it increasingly is so. Now we have a couple of studies out on your work out of University of San Francisco and Eve Ekman. Today, I'd love to explore feeding your demons. And we were just talking about how it's most impactful if you actually do it. So let's lay the foundation and framework of what it is, where it comes from, and then maybe we can practice together and give that real gift to our listeners.
So feeding your demons comes from the inspiration from an 11th century Tibetan yogini by the name of Lama Tsultrim. She was one of the few women who actually developed her own lineage in Tibet. And her teaching is based on feeding, not fighting. And so I met her teachings in 1972, and I practiced them and found it very helpful for me. Doing the traditional practice, which is somewhat shamanic, you actually undergo your own death and are reborn within the practice. And I practiced it for many years, and then my teacher encouraged me to start teaching it. So when I started teaching it, I realized that it could easily become a kind of foreign ornament that people would wear, because you sing in Tibetan, there's a drum, there's a bell, and so on. And I wasn't sure that people were really understanding what the practice was really about, and that it really was about something personal, because you feed the demons during the practice. And the fear that I had was that it would just be kind of theoretical. Plus, singing it in Tibetan and trying to do the drum and the bell at the same time, it's kind of like, patting your head, rubbing your stomach. But with one more thing going, because you've got the drum, the bell, and singing in a foreign language. I realized I could make a kind of experience of basically the content of the practice using more Western psychological modalities, similar to Gestalt therapy or psychosynthesis, and which I was familiar with, both of those. And so I developed this 5-step practice to teach people how to experience feeding your demons in a personal way, and explain that demons are not Tibetan gargoyles that you visualize, but are the real issues of our lives, like anxiety, depression, addiction. But what happened was my students, many of whom are therapists, said to me, I've been using that little method that you taught us with my clients, and that's all their clients want now, is that that experience of feeding your demons, the demon work, they call it. Mm-hmm. And so I realized, oh, this has a life of its own. It's not just the like a teaching tool. And so eventually I wrote the book, Feeding Your Demons, which came out in 2008. Now several scientific studies have been done on it. And it's translated into 28 different languages. And that's really interesting to me because it means that all these different cultures can relate to this idea of demons. And even our culture, we might think, oh, in our culture, we don't believe in demons. But if you read the newspaper, pretty much in every newspaper, you'll see someone died after fighting their demons of addiction or the demon of fear it's actually used. The word is used much more than you think. And I discovered that when I was writing the book and, I kind of had those ears for it. And I was like, well, there it is on the front page of the San Francisco Chronicle.
It's paradoxical because most of us, when we think about our demons, whether it's our demon of social anxiety or our demon of depression or our demon of jealousy or all the demons that we can have, inner demons and outer demons, our instinct is to fight them or get rid of them and block them out. And what's really fascinating about your practice that actually maps on to the third wave psychology now, which is the act of fighting is actually putting your energy disperses your energy, it exhausts you, and it actually makes the demon worse, right? The more you fight your depression, the bigger the depression gets. And what attracted me at the time when I was reading Feeding Your Demons, I was working with eating disorders a lot. And what attracted me to it was that I had seen in my own practice so many times that when an individual recovers from addiction, part of the recovery process is coming to appreciate the gifts of the addiction, appreciate the gifts that the eating disorder brought you, because there was wisdom in your eating disorder or wisdom in your addiction. There was a core underlying need. And your practice helps people get to that, the allyship with the demon. And as Eve Ekman and Greater Good Science Center and the work through UCSF, when you read through their paper, they're talking about all the different psychological processes that map onto the 5 steps. And then as we had a conversation with Dan Siegel, an attachment theory, where you had a beautiful conversation with him around attachment theory when we were in Costa Rica, it also maps onto attachment theory. So there's a consilience here of many different angles of this ancient Tibetan practice, how you've developed it, and then also what psychology and psychological science is finding as well. Walk us through it. What is it that we do in this feeding of your demons? I got a chance to do it with Trudy Goodman. I can give examples between Trudy and me, and then let's do it together.
So, I think before I lead you all through it, what I'd like to tell you is the difference between a want and a need in the way that I teach feeding your demons. So you will embody and personify the demon and see it in front of you. So first I'll have you find it in your body. Let's say it's an addiction. Where do you hold that longing most deeply in your body? And then I'll have you bring that out and personify it in front of you. And then you'll ask it 3 questions. What do you want? What do you really need? And how will you feel if you get what you really need? And so the want with an addiction is pretty simple. It wants the substance, whatever that is. The need is the underlying deeper need that is pretty primal that we all have. And Dan described that as safety, soothing, and I think there were two more S's in what he
Being
said.
seen, yes. And then he talked about the subcortical needs that we're born with of
Yeah.
to have agency and to be bonded and to care for others.
Usually when we're in a demon, let's say a demon of, you use the example of jealousy, the demon is wanting control or wanting to destroy that other person you're jealous of or whatever. But then underneath that, it's a need for security. That when you're jealous, you're feeling insecure and unsafe and not soothed. Definitely. So that process of getting from the want to the need is important. And then the question, how will you feel if you get what you need, is if that primal need is actually fulfilled, what feeling will you have? And that's what you will feed the demon. So that process of what is the want, what is the real need, and how you feel if you get what you really need is taking us into the deeper human attachment needs that we have from birth. And if those are not cared for and taken care of in childhood and infancy, then we start to develop these somewhat ineffective and unwise strategies for taking care of them, like addictions or depression or anxiety and all the rest of the ways that we act and the sort of methods that we use to try to feel safe. That usually lead us in the opposite direction. And you're really right about this idea of how feeding your demons is really the opposite of the whole paradigm of our culture, which is to destroy the enemy. Find the enemy and destroy it. I mean, if you think about terrorism, that's the whole idea. We're going to root them out and we're going to kill them all. Whereas what if we met them and said, what are you so upset about? And is there a way that we can satisfy those needs that you have without you being violent? Maybe the war on terrorism would have ended a long time ago, because then those parts of society could integrate. And it's the same thing with our own psyche.
And this is very much also, I would say, a feminine perspective, right? Is the sort of the masculine perspective is to fight and conquer and, get a hold of, own, take control. Whereas maybe a feminine perspective, and this is not necessarily male, female, but feminine, right? Feminine energy is to embrace, make space for, make room for, listen and be with. And it's a very different way, a different approach. And when we do that with ourselves and when we do that with others, it can be a different result. And we see that in, the therapy room or in relationships or even in hostage negotiation. They use things like motivational interviewing where you actually sit and you listen to the terrorist and say, tell us more about what you're wanting and what's this like for you, to actually get them to shift. So the first step is identifying, choosing a demon.
Yes.
You start with one at a time, and you said you actually recommend you do it over and over and over again, that there's hundreds of demons in there, but just choose one. And the one that I chose when I was in Costa Rica, I did this with Trudy Goodman I mentioned, but the demon that I chose was I couldn't even describe it. It was like this anxious anxiety of needing to do more. I guess it was my doing more demon that has been around for a very long time. And I could really feel it in my body. So this is part of the embodied interoceptive awareness practice of locating it in our body. And then what do we do next?
Then we bring it out of our body and personify it with arms and legs and a face and a color and a density and so on. And then we ask it those three questions. And then we change places. And so for all your listeners, you might think about where you're sitting now, and can you actually stand up and face where you're sitting now? Or is there another chair you could place in front of you to set it up? But in any case, you're not there in that opposite position very long. So standing up works fine. And then you become it. You become the demon. And you, you keep going back to the body, as you mentioned, throughout the whole practice. So in this case, you come into the body of the demon. What does it feel like to be in that body? And then being in that body, you answer those three questions. What I want is, what I really need is, if I get what I really need, I will feel. And so I'll guide everyone through these one by one. And so you don't have to worry about, am I going to have to remember those three? No, I'll give them to you one at a time. And so once that's happened, you come back into your original position and the demon is in front of you. And then your own body dissolves into nectar. And the quality of that nectar is the feeling the demon will have if it gets what it really needs. And that is really the solution. That's the fundamental solution, is the feeling it gets when it needs. And so when it gets what it really needs. So the nectar has a certain color, your body dissolves into nectar, and then you feed it this quality.
And that aspect of the feeding of the demons is that it's a compassionate relationship with the demon. When I did it with Trudy, she fed her bird like hot fudge. And she described it as hot fudge going down, this is very Trudy, going down the throat of this demon bird with this long, thin throat, right? And it's very, actually, you actually physically feel yourself feeding this thing, giving it what it needs. It's very satisfying to do it, and they just gulp it up, right? So this aspect of perspective taking would be the process in psychology that we would use, or being able to like observe and offer compassion to parts of ourselves is very much sort of what's going on there, but in a embodied way. Cool. Okay, so we feed the demon until it gets fully satisfied of what it needs, not what it wants.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it really, that's what it really needs. So it's not like, no, I'm not going to give you what you want. I'm going to give you what you need. It's really, the need is fundamentally underneath that one, and what it's actually trying to take care of with the heart. Yeah. So you feed it to complete satisfaction. And once it's fed to complete satisfaction, it transforms into the ally. And there's a couple of ways that can happen, and I'll guide you through that. The ally is the same energy that was locked in the demon, but now it's become accessible as a positive energy. And then there's a dialogue with the ally. And you change places and become the ally. And then ultimately the ally dissolves into you. You and the ally dissolve, and then you rest in open awareness, the fifth step, which is really the goal of the whole thing, is resting in open awareness without all this fighting going on that we have in ourselves most of the time.
Yes, the formless and what I guess Dan Siegel would call the plane of possibility, maybe Jack would call loving awareness. There's lots of different words for this sort of expansive
We
awareness.
call it the ground of being.
The ground of being.
You just dissolve and you rest, and you have an experience. And really, there's no name for that experience. Lots of names have been given to it. And then you come back at the end with the integrated energy of the ally, firmly embedded in all your cells. And then you go about your life.
Yeah. And then you have an ally that's just, it's so great to have your ally with you. The practice for me that I've done, I've done it different times, but when I did it with you this January, it was one of the most powerful times that I've practiced this, in the sense that the demon was so clear. She was like wearing a pencil skirt, and she had rotten teeth and a big bag of food behind her. But she was perfect on the outside. And then when she became an ally for me, she actually was a goddess being, and to see this demon be transformed into a goddess that also represented my therapist from when I was 14 years old. So it's just interesting what comes to you. And it's just, you don't have any choice around it. They just come, these allies and demons. But if people have difficulty with visualizing, will you help us with that? Like if people can't
Yeah.
get a visual?
Yeah. And there's lots of places along the way you can get hung up and wait,
Yeah.
it's not happening or not seeing it. There's a little phrase that you can use whenever you get hung up in the process of feeding your demons. So remember this, everybody. If I could see it, or if it was happening, what would it look like? Or what would be happening? So let's say you get there and you're feeding it and it's just not getting satisfied. It's insatiable. What do? You imagine if it was satisfied, what would it look like? Or let's say when I say, okay, now bring it out of your body and see it in front of you. You can't see it. If you could see it, what would it look like? So that those blockages that we have is the unconscious mind that is sabotaging the process. And so that if I could, what would it be is a way around that unconscious touch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It just opens the door a little bit so that the creativity can come in. Yeah. Okay. Well, shall we practice? Do you feel like that's enough? This is enough foundation for us to go?
I think so. And,
Okay.
I think that people can have lots of questions about this, but once they do it, a lot of those questions disappear.
Yeah.
So I think just trying it is a good idea.
Okay. Great. All right, folks, I'm going to pause us here. Lama Tsultrim goes on to take me through the practice of feeding your inner demons. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this is going to be a separate meditation on this podcast, so you can pull it up and you can do it with a lot of different demons. We all have lots of different demons inside of us that need to be fed. I've done it with my busyness, as I've mentioned. I've done it with core feelings of unworthiness. I've done it with anxiety. I've done it with feelings of animosity towards another person. And every time that I've fed my demons, there's been a fresh perspective and some compassion that has been an outgrowth of it. Pema Chodron, in her new book that's just come out, How We Live is How We Die, writes that our pain can become a window into others' pain, and this helps us to develop empathy. Our confusion can open our heart to the confusion of others. Our anxiety can increase our care for others who are anxious. We start to notice how everyone is struggling in one way or another. So as you start to practice this true self-compassion of feeding your demons, I think you may find that your compassion will spread to others as well. I'm going to debrief with Lama Tsultrim next about our experience together, so you can listen to that and then take some time for yourself later this week to feed your demons. A little hard to speak after this practice. And I'll probably record something a little after to debrief folks, but it's a powerful practice, and it's different every time you do it. It's so amazing what comes. And then there's moments where I feel like I'm not doing it. It's not going to happen. It's like, and then it happens. And my ally this time was so cool. I didn't think I was going to, it wasn't going to come. And then it was this giant eye. That's all it was just a big, massive eye. And I was like, why? I don't want this as my ally. This is so weird. But when it spoke to me about how it was going to protect me or whatever, those questions, and how do I remember that you're there? It was, oh, you just have to look into the eyes of others and you'll see me. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. Now my ally is in everybody I meet. It was super cool. Thank you. Are you doing it along with us when you're guiding it?
How I do it with, that's how I do the timing.
Yeah.
Of course, my timing isn't right for everybody, but at least if I'm doing it, it's probably better than if I'm just like, I wonder how long I should stay here, you know?
Right. That's always how I practice when I teach meditation. It's always I'm always doing it, and then I know, like, okay, go to this part of your body or experience
Yeah.
this. So what did you do it with this time? What was your practice around?
Being busy, being like, and like too many things to do and things falling through the cracks. And I had an assistant. I had an Austrian assistant who was very Germanic and very, very efficient, and she did everything. And then I went into retreat, and then she went into retreat, and then I moved, and I don't have an assistant now. So I kind of like it in the sense that sometimes I felt like I was working for her more than she was working for me, you know. But um, but it's also hard, and yeah, it's hard to choose what to do, what not to do, and you know, I'm sure you have the same demon because you're doing a lot of things, plus you've got kids.
Yeah. Yeah, the doing demon and the busy demon and then the overcomplicating things with the solutions, right? The solutions that I put on top of the demon make things even more complicated because then you have a whole team to manage and then feeling that fear of, oh, if I downsize, then that means like there's more on me. But at the same time, that means I have to have better discernment around what's important, what
I
I'm choosing to do or not do. Yeah.
It's true that, having a team, you are working for them. And then, she would always keep reminding me of emails I hadn't answered or, requests to teach that I hadn't done or, responded to. And I was like, I haven't found a solution to this. That's why it's still a demon.
I don't know if there is a solution to our busyness because it just it's like a Lucille Ball and the chocolates that come down the conveyor belt. I don't know if you ever saw the episode where these chocolates keep on coming and coming, and she's stuffing them in her mouth and stuffing in her pockets, and that's the solution that we come up with. And sometimes the solution is letting the chocolates just fall off the conveyor belt because they're going to keep on coming. And which ones are we going to pick up? And that's what I'm more and more interested in this concept from Buddhism of wise effort and the wholesome and the unwholesome and what seeds am I abandoning? Like unwholesome seeds that I do not want to water. And then what are the wholesome seeds that I do want to water? And looking at our busyness, I think is a deep look at that around the wholesome. And spending time with you for me is a wholesome seed. This practice is a wholesome practice. Like taking as much time as we did to meet our demons and turn them into allies, that practice will sit with me for months. I'll remember that giant eye, and that will be so useful to me. It's a good use of my time, even though it was sitting there, quote, doing nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then all the other things that are productive that actually don't feed me in the same way or help, help have clarity. So I appreciate you and I understand your busyness and I relate.
Yeah.
And when you have something beautiful to offer, people want a lot of it. So that's the other thing that can happen.
Yeah. And I have students, that are all over the world, and I'm their teacher, and that's a big role, so I have to show up for them. And anyway, it's it's a thing, it's a thing to figure out, and I haven't really found something. And then I'm also like getting older, and so like, do I want to keep being busy my whole life?
Yeah.
I did the other night with Ben from Ben and Jerry's.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's so fun.
And
Is he in Costa Rica right now, too?
yeah.
Everyone's there.
And he says now he's just doing things that give him joy. And that's how he decides what to do. But it's different. Ice cream's different than Dharma. You know? You get a business, that's easy. Right? You just get out of the business, sell the business. You know, but Dharma, teachers don't really retire.
Lama Tsultrim, thank you for that beautiful practice. Thank you for your offerings and your teachings and all you're doing that we get to receive from. And I hope that you receive from me right now gratitude, because the practice that you've offered me not only transforms me, but my clients and all the people that I meet, and then the people that they love and the people that they struggle with. So it reaches many. And so your gifts are gifts that are exponential.